On January 24, 2026, a federal law enforcement operation took place in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was not announced in advance. There were no press briefings that morning, no public warnings. To most people in the city, it looked like an ordinary winter day. Cold, quiet, unremarkable. But by the end of that day, one man would be dead, and his name would appear in headlines across the United States. That man was Alex Pretti. According to official statements, the incident occurred during a federal immigration enforcement operation. According to witnesses, events unfolded rapidly and with little warning. Video recordings captured fragments of what happened, enough to raise questions, not enough to provide a complete picture. Within hours, the story began to spread. Within days, it became a subject of national debate. Not because of who Alex Pretti was, but because of what his death appeared to represent. This documentary does not aim to decide guilt or innocence. It does not attempt to assign blame. Instead, it seeks to understand, to examine what is known, to identify what remains unclear, and to place this incident within a wider social and institutional context. Because cases like this rarely exist in isolation.
The operation. On January 24th, federal agents were conducting an enforcement operation related to immigration violations. Such operations typically involve identifying specific individuals, locating them, and attempting to detain them for further legal proceedings. In theory, these operations are targeted. In practice, they often unfold in unpredictable environments: public streets, residential areas, places where bystanders are present. What exactly this operation involved remains partially unclear. Federal agencies later stated that agents were acting within their authority, that they perceived a threat, that they responded accordingly. Witnesses, however, described confusion. They described shouting, movement, a situation that escalated quickly. The first reports described a man shot during a federal operation. At first, details were scarce. No name was released. No clear explanation was offered. Only confirmation that a shooting had occurred and that the individual involved had died. Within hours, social media filled the gaps. Videos appeared, short clips, shaky footage, partial views. None of them showed the full sequence of events, but together they suggested a confrontation that had ended violently. As more information emerged, one detail stood out. The man who was killed was not the target of the immigration operation. He was not being sought by federal authorities. He was, according to multiple accounts, a bystander. That detail changed everything. Who was Alex Pretti? When the name Alex Pretti was released, it did not immediately resonate with the public. He was not a politician, not an activist, not a public figure. He was a nurse, 37 years old, working in healthcare. Friends and colleagues described him as calm, non-confrontational, someone who avoided conflict, someone who focused on his work. This contrast became central to the story. A man whose professional life revolved around caring for others, killed during a law enforcement operation. For many people, this raised a simple question: how does someone like that end up dead in such a situation?
Why this case spread. In the days following the incident, coverage expanded rapidly. National outlets began reporting on it, not just as a local tragedy, but as part of a broader pattern. The story intersected with several ongoing debates: federal authority versus local oversight, immigration enforcement tactics, the role of bystanders during law enforcement operations, the use of force, transparency, accountability. Each of these issues already carried significant public attention. This case brought them together in one moment. Two versions of events. Almost immediately, two narratives began to form. The first was the official account. Federal authorities stated that agents perceived a threat, that the situation escalated, that force was used in response to that perceived threat. The second narrative came from witnesses, individuals who were present at the scene, some of whom recorded video. They described a man holding a phone. They described attempts to intervene verbally. They described confusion rather than aggression. These two narratives did not align, and that misalignment became the focus of public scrutiny. The role of video. Video footage played a crucial role in shaping public reaction, but it also created limitations. Videos capture angles, moments, not intent, not context. Some clips appear to show Alex Pretti holding an object. Authorities later claimed it was a weapon. Witnesses disputed this. Others said it was a phone. The videos did not clearly resolve the question. Instead, they intensified it. Why questions matter. In many cases, incidents involving law enforcement are resolved quietly. Investigations are conducted. Reports are filed. Public attention fades. This case was different because it involved federal agents rather than local police, because it occurred in a city already sensitive to enforcement actions, because the individual killed did not appear to be the target, and because information was limited.
A system under pressure. To understand why this incident resonated, it is necessary to look beyond the event itself. Federal immigration enforcement in the United States had expanded significantly in the years prior. Operations became more frequent, more visible, and more controversial. Supporters argued these actions were necessary to enforce existing laws. Critics argued they created fear and instability within communities. Minneapolis was one of several cities where these tensions were especially pronounced. The immediate aftermath. In the hours following the shooting, the area was secured. Federal agents remained on site. Local authorities were present, but control of the scene rested primarily with federal agencies. This alone raised questions. Which agency would investigate? How much information would be released and when? Public statements were limited. Families waited. Communities waited. Media waited. Public response. As news spread, reactions varied. Some called for calm. Others called for answers. Protests began to form, small at first, then larger. Signs appeared. Chants were heard. The name Alex Pretti was repeated. For many protesters, this was not just about one man. It was about fear, about the unpredictability of enforcement actions, about the sense that ordinary people could become collateral damage. Why this documentary exists. This documentary exists because clarity matters. Not clarity of opinion, but clarity of fact. What happened? What is known? What remains disputed? And why does it matter beyond this single case? Over the next parts, we will examine these questions in detail. We will look at Alex Pretti's life, the operation that brought federal agents to that location, the exact sequence of events as reconstructed from available evidence, and the broader implications for law enforcement practices. What comes next? In the next part, we will step back, away from the headlines, away from the moment of violence. we will examine who Alex Pretti was before January 24th, his background, his career, and the values that shaped his life. Because to understand the impact of his death, we must first understand the life that was lost.
To understand why the death of Alex Pretti resonated so strongly, it is necessary to step away from the incident itself, away from the street, away from the agents, away from the videos, and look at the person who existed before that day. Because public reaction is rarely driven by facts alone. It is shaped by perception, and perception is shaped by who the person was believed to be. Early life. Alex Pretti was born and raised in the American Midwest, a region often associated with small towns, close communities, and relatively ordinary lives. People who grow up there are not typically surrounded by constant political conflict. They are surrounded by routine, school, work, family. Those who knew Alex during his early years describe him as quiet, not withdrawn, but not confrontational. He was not the person who dominated conversations. He was not seeking attention. In school, he participated in sports, football, baseball, track. Not as a standout star, but as a team member, someone who showed up, someone who followed through. Teachers later described him as reliable, not disruptive, not rebellious. He did not seek conflict with authority, and he did not seek to challenge systems. Family and values. Alex grew up in a family that valued stability, hard work, and responsibility. There is no record of extreme political views, no history of activism, no indication that he saw himself as part of any movement. Friends say he was practical, grounded, someone who believed that life should be lived quietly and honestly. He was not known for taking risks. He did not chase danger. He did not seek confrontation. This would later become one of the most discussed aspects of his story. Education and career choice. Alex did not pursue a high-profile career path. He did not move to a major coastal city. He did not enter politics or business. Instead, he chose healthcare, a field that demands patience and emotional resilience. This choice alone sets him apart from many people who later become involved in controversial incidents. Healthcare workers are trained to de-escalate, to remain calm, to assess situations carefully. Alex trained as a nurse, eventually working in hospital settings that served veterans. This is a demanding environment. Patients often carry physical injuries, psychological trauma, long-term health complications. Colleagues later describe them as attentive, someone who listened, someone who did not rush patients, someone who took his time. Working with veterans. Working in veteran healthcare is not simple. Many patients struggle with post-traumatic stress, chronic pain, disability, and frustration with institutions. Nurses in these environments are often exposed to emotional volatility, anger, fear, hopelessness. Alex was described as someone who handled these situations calmly. He did not raise his voice. He did not respond with authority. He responded with patience. This detail would later become central to how people interpreted his actions during the incident, because it suggested a pattern, a way of behaving under pressure. Personality and daily life. Outside of work, Alex lived quietly. He did not maintain a strong online presence. He did not post political commentary. He did not document his life extensively. He enjoyed outdoor activities, spending time alone, staying active. Friends say he valued routine. He preferred predictable environments. He did not enjoy chaos. This matters because when people try to reconstruct behavior during critical moments, they often look for patterns. And the pattern here
did not suggest impulsivity.
No history of violence. One of the first things investigators and journalists examined was Alex's background. They looked for criminal records, arrests, violent incidents. None were found. There was no documented history of violence, no charges, no known altercations with law enforcement. This absence became significant because it removed one potential explanation: why his identity mattered. In cases involving law enforcement, public response often depends on who the individual was. When the person has a criminal history, public sympathy is divided. When the person has a controversial past, narratives fragment. In Alex Pretti's case, there was very little to fragment. He fit a familiar image: a healthcare worker, a civilian, someone who existed outside of political conflict. This made his death more difficult to rationalize for many people. The day before. In the days leading up to January 24th, there is no indication that Alex anticipated danger. There were no final messages, no statements, no warnings. He followed his routine: work, rest, preparation for the following day. Nothing suggests he believed he would be involved in any confrontation. Why he was there. One of the most persistent questions surrounding the incident is simple: why was Alex Pretti at that location? Available information suggests he was not involved in the immigration operation. He was not being targeted. He was not under investigation. He appears to have been present as a bystander, a person who encountered an unfolding situation unexpectedly. This distinction matters because bystanders are not trained for law enforcement operations. They do not know protocols. They do not know when to intervene or step back. The role of perception. Much of the debate around this case centers on perception: how Alex perceived the situation and how agents perceived Alex. Healthcare professionals are trained to respond to distress. When someone appears to be in trouble, the instinct is often to help, to assess, to speak. Law enforcement, particularly during operations, is trained to identify threats, to control environments, to limit interference. When these two mindsets intersect, misinterpretation becomes possible.
Did he understand the risk? There is no evidence that Alex believed his presence was dangerous. No evidence that he understood the operation as a high-risk enforcement action. Witnesses later said the situation escalated quickly, that instructions were not always clear, that shouting and movement created confusion. In such moments, people rely on instinct, and instinct is shaped by experience. Alex's experience was not in enforcement. It was in care. The question of intent. One of the central issues in this case is intent. What did Alex intend to do in those moments? Was he attempting to intervene? Was he attempting to document? Was he attempting to help someone he believed was being harmed? Authorities later claimed he posed a threat. Witnesses strongly disputed this. Intent cannot always be determined from video alone. It must be inferred from behavior, and behavior must be understood in context. Why context matters. Without understanding who Alex Pretti was, interpretations become abstract. He becomes a silhouette in a video, a figure without history. Context gives meaning to actions. It does not excuse outcomes, but it explains how situations unfold. In this case, context suggests a man who was not seeking confrontation, not seeking to challenge authority, not seeking attention. The limits of background analysis. At the same time, background does not determine outcomes. People act unpredictably under stress. Situations evolve rapidly. This documentary does not claim that Alex's character guarantees innocence. It does not suggest that his profession defines his actions. It simply establishes a baseline, a life pattern against which actions can be evaluated. Public identification. As details about Alex's life emerged, public identification increased. People recognized him as someone like themselves, a worker, a caregiver, a civilian. This identification fueled outrage, not because it proved wrongdoing, but because it challenged assumptions. A life interrupted. Whatever conclusions are eventually reached, one fact remains undisputed. Alex Pretti's life ended on January 24th. A life defined by routine, by service, by quiet consistency. This alone is enough to warrant careful examination. What this part establishes. This part of the documentary establishes three things. First, Alex Pretti was not a public figure. Second, he had no documented history of violence. Third, his professional and personal background suggests a pattern of calm behavior. These facts do not resolve the case, but they frame it. What comes next? In the next part, we will move from the person to the environment, from individual history to institutional context. We will examine the federal operation itself, how such operations are structured, who authorizes them, and why they often unfold in unpredictable ways. Because to understand what happened next, we must understand the system that created the moment.
Federal immigration operations, how the system works and why it matters. To understand what happened on January 24th, it is necessary to understand the system that placed federal agents on that street. Not the individuals, not their intentions, but the structure that guided their actions. Because incidents like this do not occur in isolation. They emerge from procedures, from policy decisions, from institutional frameworks that shape how force is applied. What federal operations are. Federal immigration enforcement operations are designed to locate and detain individuals suspected of violating immigration law. These operations are typically authorized at a federal level. They are planned in advance. They involve multiple layers of approval. Unlike local policing, federal immigration enforcement operates under a different mandate. Its focus is not community safety in the traditional sense. It is compliance with federal immigration statutes. This distinction matters because it influences priorities, and priorities influence behavior. How operations are planned. Before an operation begins, agents receive briefings. They are given names, addresses, descriptions, risk assessments. These assessments are often based on limited information, databases, prior encounters, administrative records. They are not always current. They are not always complete. Agents are trained to assume uncertainty, to expect resistance, to prepare for escalation. The role of perceived threat. In enforcement doctrine, perception plays a critical role. If an agent perceives a threat, protocols allow for rapid escalation. This perception does not require confirmed danger. It requires belief. This principle is central to understanding what happened because perception is subjective and subjectivity creates space for error. Environments of uncertainty. Immigration enforcement operations frequently occur in uncontrolled environments, apartment complexes, parking lots, public streets. Unlike planned raids on secured facilities, these locations involve bystanders, neighbors, passers-by, people with no knowledge of the operation. This creates complexity because agents must identify targets while also monitoring surroundings, while also managing unpredictable civilian behavior. Training and response. Federal agents receive training in de-escalation, but they are also trained in threat neutralization. These two objectives can conflict. De-escalation requires time. Threat neutralization prioritizes speed. When situations unfold rapidly, speed often prevails. The issue of identification. One of the most common problems in enforcement operations is misidentification. Targets resemble others. Bystanders move unpredictably. Objects are misinterpreted. A phone can resemble a weapon. A gesture can appear aggressive. Movement can be perceived as intent. This is not speculation. It is a documented risk acknowledged in training materials. Why bystanders matter. Bystanders complicate enforcement operations. They introduce variables that cannot be controlled. They may record. They may speak. They may attempt to intervene. From the perspective of agents, bystanders represent unknowns. Unknowns represent risk. From the perspective of civilians, agents represent authority. Authority often invites scrutiny. This tension is built into the system. Legal authority and limits. Federal immigration agents operate under broad legal authority. They are permitted to detain, to question, to use force under certain conditions. However, these powers are not unlimited. They are constrained by constitutional protections and by internal policy. The challenge lies in interpretation. What constitutes resistance? What constitutes threat? What justifies lethal force? These questions are often answered after the fact. Operational pressure. Agents conducting enforcement operations operate under pressure. Targets may flee. Crowds may gather. Situations may escalate. Speed is emphasized. Control is prioritized. In such conditions, mistakes become more likely, not because of malice, but because of structural design. Why these operations attract controversy. Immigration enforcement has long been controversial. Supporters argue it is necessary for the rule of law. Critics argue it creates fear and instability. This controversy is not theoretical. It shapes how communities respond and how agents anticipate resistance. In cities like Minneapolis, where trust between communities and law enforcement has already been strained, this tension is amplified. A system designed for conflict. The structure of immigration enforcement places agents and civilians in adversarial positions, even when no confrontation is intended. Agents expect resistance. Civilians expect enforcement. Both sides prepare for conflict. This creates an environment where misunderstanding can escalate rapidly. Why this matters for the case. The death of Alex Pretti cannot be understood without this context. He did not enter a neutral environment. He entered an operational zone, one governed by assumptions, procedures, and threat assessments. Whether or not those assessments were correct remains disputed, but the framework that enabled them is clear. Questions without answers. Was the operation properly planned? Were agents adequately informed about the environment? Were bystanders expected? Were protocols followed? These questions form the foundation of subsequent investigations. What this part establishes. This part establishes that federal immigration operations are conducted under high uncertainty, dependent on subjective threat perception, carried out in uncontrolled environments, structurally prone to rapid escalation. These factors do not assign blame. They explain risk. What comes next? In the next part, we will return to January 24th, to the morning itself, to the timeline, minute by minute, step by step. We will reconstruct what is known, what is disputed, and where the critical moments occurred. The morning of January 24th, a timeline reconstruction. To understand what happened on January 24th, 2026, it is necessary to slow time down, not to speculate, not to judge, but to reconstruct.
because moments of violence are rarely sudden in isolation. They are usually the result of a sequence, small actions, small decisions, taken in a short period of time. This part of the documentary reconstructs the morning of January 24th based on publicly available information, official statements, witness accounts, video fragments, and timelines established by investigators and journalists. Not everything is known. Some details remain disputed, others are still under review. Where information is unclear, that uncertainty will be stated directly. Early morning conditions. January 24th began like many winter mornings in Minneapolis. Cold, quiet, low visibility in some areas due to weather conditions. There were no citywide alerts, no public warnings, no indication that anything unusual would take place. Federal agents involved in the operation had begun preparations earlier that morning. Briefings had already taken place. Assignments had been given. Targets had been identified. According to federal sources, the operation was part of a broader enforcement effort scheduled across multiple locations. The objective was to locate and detain specific individuals. The operation begins. By mid-morning, agents were positioned in the area. Vehicles were parked nearby. Some were marked, others were not. Agents were dressed in standard operational attire. Not all wore uniforms clearly identifiable to civilians. This detail matters because in mixed environments, visual identification can be unclear. Bystanders may not immediately recognize who is present or why. At this point, there is no indication that Alex Pretti was aware of the operation. There is no evidence that he had any prior connection to the targets, or that he had been briefed on the situation. First signs of tension. Witnesses later described seeing federal agents approach individuals in the area. Voices were raised, instructions were given, movement increased. Several bystanders reportedly stopped to observe, some from a distance, others closer. This is common in public enforcement actions. When authority becomes visible, attention follows. Alex Pretti enters the scene. At some point during the operation, Alex Pretti became present in the immediate area. The exact reason remains unclear. Available accounts suggest he was not the subject of enforcement. Witnesses later stated that Alex appeared to be observing, possibly recording, possibly attempting to understand what was happening. This moment is critical because it marks the transition from observation to involvement.
The role of recording. Multiple witnesses reported that Alex was holding a phone. Some stated he was recording video. Others stated he appeared to be looking at the screen. In modern enforcement situations, recording is common. It is legal in most public spaces, but it can be perceived differently by officers. Recording can be interpreted as documentation, or as interference, or as surveillance. The interpretation depends on context and perception. Initial interaction. According to witness accounts, verbal exchanges occurred. Commands were given. It is unclear whether these commands were directed at Alex or at others nearby. Some witnesses said instructions were not clearly audible. Others said the situation was chaotic. This lack of clarity becomes important later because compliance depends on understanding. Escalation begins. At some point, the situation escalated. Witnesses describe increased shouting, movement, physical repositioning by agents. Video footage from this stage is fragmented, short clips, shaky angles. No single recording captures the entire sequence. This fragmentation complicates reconstruction. The object in question. One of the most disputed aspects of the incident involves an object seen in Alex's hand. Authorities later stated that agents believed the object to be a weapon. Witnesses strongly disputed this claim. Some said it was clearly a phone,
Others said they could not tell. Video footage does not conclusively resolve the issue. Resolution is limited. Angles are obstructed. Lighting is inconsistent. This uncertainty lies at the center of the case. Perception of threat. Federal agents later stated that they perceived a threat. That perception triggered response protocols. It is important to understand how threat perception works in enforcement. Agents are trained to react to perceived danger, not confirmed danger. If an agent believes there is an imminent risk, escalation is authorized. The question, therefore, is not only what was present, but what was believed. The moment of force. According to official timelines, force was used within a very short time frame after the perceived threat. Witnesses describe hearing gunshots. Some report 2 shots. Others report more. Alex Pretti was struck. He fell. Emergency response followed shortly after. At this point, the situation effectively ended. The operation ceased. Attention shifted from enforcement to medical response. Immediate aftermath at the scene. Agents secured the area. Bystanders were pushed back. Some continued recording. Others were visibly distressed. Emergency medical personnel arrived. Attempts were made to provide aid. Alex Pretti was pronounced dead at the scene. This fact is undisputed. Confusion and silence. In the immediate minutes following the shooting, confusion dominated. No clear explanations were given to those present. Witnesses reported being told to leave. Information was limited. Speculation filled the vacuum. This period of uncertainty contributed to the intensity of public reaction later.
Initial official statements. Hours after the incident, federal authorities released a brief statement. It confirmed that an individual had been shot during an operation. It stated that agents perceived a threat. It emphasized that an investigation would follow. Details were minimal. Names were withheld. Context was limited. For many, this lack of transparency raised concerns. Witness accounts emerged. As the day progressed, witness accounts began appearing online. Some described Alex as calm, others described confusion. Several stated that he did not appear aggressive. These accounts did not align neatly with the official statement. Discrepancies emerged. Questions multiplied. Video footage circulated. Clips recorded by bystanders spread quickly. They were shared on social media, then by news outlets. Each clip was analyzed, paused, replayed, but none provided a definitive answer. Instead, they fueled debate. Timeline gaps. Experts in use of force analysis emphasize the role of speed. Decisions are often made in fractions of a second, under stress, with incomplete information. This does not resolve responsibility, but it explains how situations can escalate rapidly. Why this moment matters. The morning of January 24th is the pivot point of the entire case. It is where policy meets reality, where structure meets chaos. Every later debate traces back to these minutes. What is known with certainty? Several facts are not disputed. A federal operation was underway. Alex Pretti was not the target. Force was used. Alex Pretti was killed. What remains disputed? Other facts remain unresolved. What object Alex was holding? Whether commands were clearly issued? Whether de-escalation was possible? Whether perception aligned with reality? These questions define the case. Why reconstruction is difficult. Unlike planned operations, this incident unfolded in public, with uncontrolled variables, with bystanders, with incomplete documentation. Reconstruction relies on interpretation, and interpretation is contested. What this part establishes:
This part establishes the sequence of events, not motive, not blame. It shows how quickly the situation evolved, how little time there was for correction, and how a routine enforcement operation became a fatal encounter. What comes next? In the next part, we will examine the two competing narratives, the official version and the witness version, side by side, point by point, because understanding this case requires examining not just what happened, but how it was explained.
The official version: statements, justifications, and institutional language. When a fatal incident involves federal law enforcement, the first narrative to reach the public is almost always the official one. It arrives through press releases, brief statements, carefully chosen language. In the case of Alex Pretti, this process followed a familiar pattern. Information was released gradually. Details were limited. Language was controlled. This part of the documentary examines the official version of events, not to accept it, not to reject it, but to understand how it was constructed, what it emphasized, what it omitted, and how institutional language shapes public perception. The first statement. Several hours after the shooting, a brief statement was issued by federal authorities. It confirmed that a shooting had occurred during a federal operation. It stated that an individual had been killed. It emphasized that agents perceived a threat. No name was released at that time. No description of the individual's background was provided. No explanation of the specific actions that led to the use of force was offered. This is standard procedure. Early statements are often limited to confirmed facts, or facts that institutions are willing to confirm. Language of perception. One of the most important phrases in the official statement was the word perceived. Agents perceived a threat. This term is not accidental. In use of force policy, perception is a key concept. It acknowledges subjectivity, and it provides legal framing. Perceived threat does not require confirmation. It requires belief. By using this phrase, the statement established a foundation. It suggested that agents acted based on their understanding at the moment, not on later analysis. Absence of detail. Notably, absent from the initial statement were specifics. There was no mention of what the perceived threat was, no mention of the object involved, no mention of commands issued. This absence is also typical. Institutions often avoid details that could later be contradicted or that could limit interpretive flexibility. At this stage, the goal is not explanation, it is containment. Promise of investigation. The statement concluded with a familiar assurance that the incident would be investigated, that protocols would be reviewed, that transparency would follow. These promises are standard. They signal accountability without admitting fault. For many observers, however, such assurances have become routine, and routine statements often fail to satisfy public demand for clarity. Subsequent briefings. In the days following the incident, additional information was released, still limited, still carefully framed. Officials stated that agents believed the individual was armed. They emphasized rapid escalation. They referenced safety concerns. Again, specifics were scarce. No detailed timeline was provided. No explanation of how the belief was formed. The role of internal policy. To understand these statements, it is important to understand internal policy. Federal agencies operate under use of force guidelines. These guidelines prioritize officer safety. They allow for lethal force when an agent reasonably believes there is an imminent threat. The key word here is reasonable. Reasonableness is evaluated later, often internally, sometimes externally. But at the moment of the incident, reasonableness is assumed.
How statements are structured.
Official statements follow a predictable structure. First, confirmation of the incident. Second, reference to perceived threat. Third, assurance of investigation. This structure serves several purposes. It informs the public without revealing vulnerabilities. It limits speculation. It protects the institution. What it does not do is satisfy public curiosity. Shifting language over time. As public attention intensified, language shifted slightly. Officials began acknowledging public concern. They expressed sympathy. They recognized the seriousness of the incident. However, sympathy was carefully separated from responsibility. Expressions of regret did not include admissions of error. This distinction is intentional. Institutions rarely concede fault before investigations conclude. The question of weapons. One of the most contested elements of the official narrative involved the alleged presence of a weapon. Authorities stated that agents believed the individual was armed. They did not initially specify the type of weapon. They did not clarify whether it was recovered. This ambiguity allowed multiple interpretations. It suggested danger without confirming it. Witnesses later challenged this claim, but official statements remained consistent in their wording: belief, perception, assessment. Why belief matters legally. In legal proceedings, belief plays a crucial role. If an agent genuinely believed there was an imminent threat, actions taken in response may be deemed justified. This does not require the threat to be real. It requires it to be perceived. This standard creates a protective framework for agents, but it also creates frustration for the public, because it can appear to excuse outcomes without resolving facts. Response to video evidence. As video footage circulated, officials were asked to comment. They acknowledged the existence of video. They stated it would be reviewed. They did not provide interpretation. They did not confirm or deny specific claims. This restraint is deliberate. Video evidence can complicate official narratives, especially when it is incomplete. Institutional silence. At certain points, officials declined to answer questions. They cited ongoing investigations. They emphasized due process. While legally sound, this silence often deepens suspicion. In high-profile cases, absence of information is often interpreted as concealment, even when it is procedural. Comparison to past cases. Observers quickly compared this case to previous incidents. Similar language appeared, similar phrases, similar assurances. This repetition contributed to public skepticism. It suggested a pattern, not necessarily of wrongdoing, but of communication strategy.
Why communication matters. In incidents involving public trust, communication is critical. The way information is released influences perception. Delays create speculation. Ambiguity creates suspicion. In this case, official communication was cautious, controlled, procedural. For some, this conveyed professionalism. For others, it conveyed distance. Internal versus external audiences. It is important to note that official statements are written for multiple audiences: the public, the media, internal oversight bodies, legal teams. Each audience requires different considerations. Public clarity may conflict with legal protection. Institutions often prioritize legal considerations. The limits of official narratives. Official narratives are not designed to answer every question. They are designed to establish a baseline. They provide a framework within which investigations operate, but they rarely resolve controversy on their own. What the official version does not say. Equally important is what the official version does not address. It does not explain why the individual was present.
It does not explain whether de-escalation was attempted. It does not explain whether alternative responses were possible. These omissions leave space that witnesses and media attempt to fill. Why the official version persists. Despite criticism, official narratives often persist. They are reinforced by institutional authority. They are supported by legal standards. They are rarely contradicted internally. This persistence does not imply correctness. It implies structure. What this part establishes. This part establishes that the official version of events centers on perceived threat, uses controlled and cautious language, limits detail in early stages, prioritizes institutional protection, promises investigation without immediate transparency. Understanding this framework is essential because it shapes every subsequent discussion. What comes next? In the next part, we will examine the other side of the story: witness accounts, civilian perspectives, contradictions. We will compare these accounts to the official narrative, point by point, not to decide who is right, but to understand why the narratives diverge.
Witnesses speak. Civilian accounts, contradictions, and the limits of memory. When official statements leave questions unanswered, attention turns to witnesses, people who were present, people who saw fragments of what happened, people whose accounts, taken together, form an alternative narrative. In the case of Alex Pretti, witness testimony became central almost immediately, not because it provided certainty, but because it challenged the official framing. Who the witnesses were. Witnesses were not a single group. They included residents of nearby buildings, passers-by, individuals who stopped to observe, people who began recording. They varied in age, background, and proximity to the event. Some were close, others were several meters away. Some had unobstructed views, others saw only partial moments. This diversity matters because it explains why accounts differ. The first accounts. In the hours following the shooting, witnesses spoke informally, to each other, to journalists, to social media audiences. Many described confusion. They did not immediately understand who the agents were or why force was being used. Several witnesses said the situation escalated quickly, that there was little time to process what was happening. Recording as a reaction. A common element in many accounts is recording. People began filming instinctively, not as a planned act, but as a reaction. Recording served multiple purposes: documentation, self-protection, and for some, a sense of responsibility. Witnesses stated that Alex appeared to be recording as well. They described him holding a phone, looking at a screen, standing still. This detail appears consistently across multiple accounts. Descriptions of Alex's behavior. Witnesses described Alex as calm, not aggressive, not shouting. Several stated that he did not make sudden movements, that he did not appear threatening. Others noted that he seemed focused on the interaction between agents and another individual, possibly concerned, possibly confused. No witness described him charging. No witness described him attacking. Commands and compliance. One of the most contested issues is whether Alex was given clear commands. Some witnesses stated they heard shouting, but could not make out words. Others said commands were directed at someone else, not at Alex. A few said they heard instructions to step back, but were unsure who they were meant for. This lack of clarity is critical, because compliance depends on understanding. Distance and angle. Witness testimony is shaped by physical position. Distance affects perception, angle affects interpretation. Some witnesses were directly facing the scene, others viewed it from the side. Some were behind vehicles, others behind people. These differences explain inconsistencies. They do not invalidate accounts. They contextualize them. The object in Alex's hand. Multiple witnesses addressed the object seen in Alex's hand. Most stated it was a phone. Some said they were certain. Others said they believed it was. A smaller number said they could not tell. They saw an object, but could not identify it. No civilian witness stated they saw a firearm. This does not prove one was not present.
but it is a notable pattern. Sound and sequence. Witnesses described the sound of gunshots. Some recalled 2 shots, others recalled more. Time perception varied. Some felt it happened instantly. Others described a brief pause. Stress affects memory. Moments of shock distort sequence. Investigators often treat these discrepancies as expected.
Emotional reaction. Many witnesses described emotional distress, shock, fear, anger. Several stated that the shooting felt unnecessary, that it happened too fast, that there was no visible attempt to slow the situation. These reactions influenced public interpretation. Emotion shapes narrative. The role of crowd dynamics. As more people gathered, dynamics changed. Movement increased. Noise increased. Confusion intensified. Crowds amplify uncertainty. Individuals may misinterpret actions. Agents may perceive increased threat. Civilians may perceive increased danger. This feedback loop accelerates escalation. Video and witness testimony. Video footage both supports and complicates witness accounts. It confirms some details and contradicts others. Videos show fragments, not continuity. Witnesses often fill gaps, but memory is imperfect. This combination creates layered narratives. Consistencies across accounts. Despite variation, several points appear consistently. Alex was not the target. He appeared to be holding a phone. The situation escalated quickly. Commands were unclear. The use of force surprised witnesses. Consistency does not equal accuracy, but it increases credibility. Discrepancies and why they matter. Some discrepancies remain: timing, exact positioning, sequence of commands. These discrepancies are not unusual. They reflect human perception. In investigations, patterns matter more than precision. Challenges for investigators. Investigators must reconcile accounts, weigh credibility, cross-reference video. This process takes time and often yields probabilities, not certainties. Witnesses are rarely wrong, they are rarely complete.
Public trust and witness voices. For many members of the public, witness accounts carried emotional weight. They sounded human, immediate, unfiltered. In contrast, official statements sounded procedural, controlled. This contrast influenced trust. Media amplification. Media outlets highlighted witness testimony, especially accounts that contradicted official statements. Headlines emphasized phrases like "witnesses say" and "bystanders report." This framing elevated civilian voices. The risk of oversimplification. However, media amplification can oversimplify. Complex events become binary, truth versus lie. In reality, events are rarely so clear. Witness accounts add dimension. They do not automatically resolve contradictions. What witnesses can and cannot do. Witnesses can describe what they saw, what they heard, how they felt. They cannot determine intent. They cannot assess policy. They cannot see the full picture. Their value lies in perspective, not conclusion. Why witness testimony remains central. Despite limitations, witness testimony remains essential. It counters institutional opacity. It provides human context. It challenges assumptions. Without it, the narrative would remain one-sided. What this part establishes. This part establishes that civilian witnesses largely describe a non-aggressive presence. The object in Alex's hand was widely believed to be a phone.
Commands and escalation were unclear. Video evidence is fragmented. Memory and perception vary under stress. These factors explain why narratives diverge. What comes next? In the next part, we will examine video evidence in detail. What it shows, what it does not show, and why visual proof is often less definitive than it appears.
In modern incidents involving law enforcement, video footage often becomes the centerpiece of public debate. Cameras are everywhere: phones, dash cams, security systems. Video is often treated as truth, as proof, as an objective record of reality. But video does not explain itself. It does not provide context. It does not show intent. In the case of Alex Pretti, video evidence played a decisive role, not because it resolved the case, but because it intensified disagreement. The first clips. The first videos appeared within hours of the shooting. They were short, shaky, recorded from different distances. Some showed agents clustered together. Others showed a man on the ground. Some captured the sound of gunfire. None showed the entire sequence. This fragmentation defined the public understanding from the beginning. Why no single video exists? Unlike body cameras used by local police, federal immigration agents are not always required to wear body cameras in every operation. At the time of the incident, no complete official body cam footage was immediately released. This meant the public relied on civilian recordings, which are inherently incomplete. Each recording begins late, ends early, misses something. What the videos confirm? Despite their limitations, the videos confirm several facts. They confirm the presence of federal agents. They confirm the use of firearms. They confirm that Alex Pretti was not actively fleeing. They also confirmed that bystanders were present and that recording was taking place. These points are not disputed. What the videos do not show. Crucially, the videos do not clearly show a weapon in Alex Pretti's hand, clear verbal commands directed at him, a prolonged attempt at de-escalation, the precise moment a threat was identified. This absence is not proof of absence, but it is absence. The problem of angles. Camera angles matter. Most videos were recorded from the side or behind other people. Hands are often obscured. Objects are partially visible. Motion blur affects clarity. A phone can resemble a weapon. A shadow can resemble movement. Interpretation becomes subjective. Slow motion and misinterpretation. Many viewers slowed the footage down, frame by frame, pixel by pixel. This creates a false sense of precision. Video resolution limits detail. Compression alters color. Motion artifacts distort shape. What looks clear in slow motion may not be accurate in reality. Experts caution against over-reliance on frame analysis.
Audio limitations. Audio quality in the videos is poor. Wind, traffic, crowd noise. Commands, if issued, are difficult to distinguish. Words blur together. Tone is unclear. This complicates evaluation of compliance. Official review of footage. Federal authorities acknowledged reviewing video footage. They stated it would be considered as part of the investigation. However, they did not publicly interpret the footage. They did not release synchronized timelines. They did not annotate frames. This silence allowed competing interpretations to flourish. How different groups see the same video. Supporters of the official version focus on moments that suggest uncertainty. Hand movement. Agent positioning. Rapid escalation. Critics focus on moments that suggest calm, stillness, recording posture, lack of visible aggression. Both groups use the same footage and reach different conclusions. The illusion of objectivity. Video feels objective, but it is filtered by angle, by duration, by interpretation. Psychologists note that viewers project expectations onto footage. What they expect to see influences what they believe they see. This is especially true in polarized contexts. Comparison to other cases. Similar debates have occurred in past incidents. Footage is analyzed. Opinions harden. Investigations proceed slowly. Rarely does video alone resolve controversy. Instead, it becomes one piece of a larger puzzle. Why video raised more questions? In this case, video raised key questions. Why was Alex perceived as a threat? What specific action triggered force? Was there time to reassess? The footage does not answer these questions definitively. The gap between law and public expectation. Legally, perception of threat may justify action. Publicly, expectation often demands visible danger. This gap fuels controversy. Video footage sits at the center of this gap. Media presentation of footage. Media outlets selected clips, cropped frames, headlined interpretations. Some emphasized ambiguity, others emphasized contradiction. This selective presentation influenced public reaction. Social media and acceleration. On social media, footage spread rapidly. Commentary followed instantly. Judgment preceded investigation. Nuance was lost. Certainty increased. This dynamic amplified division.
Why video did not settle the case? Ultimately, video did not settle the case because it is incomplete. It lacks context. It requires interpretation. It does not show intent. This reality frustrates viewers, but it reflects the limits of visual evidence. The role of investigators. Investigators use video differently. They combine it with witness statements, physical evidence, training standards, policy analysis. Video informs, it does not decide. What this means for the case. For the case of Alex Pretti, video evidence became a symbol of transparency and a symbol of uncertainty. It allowed people to see, but not to fully understand. Why this matters beyond this case. The reliance on video reflects a broader issue. Society expects cameras to deliver truth, but truth often requires interpretation. This tension will persist. What this part establishes. This part establishes that video confirms the event but not intent. Footage is fragmented and inconclusive. Interpretation depends on perspective. Visual evidence has limits. Understanding these limits is essential, because conclusions drawn from video alone are often incomplete. Closing the first video. At this point, the facts are clear. A man is dead. A federal operation ended in violence. Official statements emphasize perceived threat. Witnesses describe confusion and calm. Video evidence exists, but does not resolve contradiction. This is where the first chapter of this story ends, not with answers, but with questions. In the next video, we will move forward into the aftermath, the protests, the investigations, and the long process of accountability. Because the story of Alex Pretti did not end on January 24th. That was only the beginning.